we underestimate, I think, and I'd love to get your sense as a member of the non-aligned media, I guess, that the crazier the thing that Tucker says, or the crazier the thing that Trump says, or the crazier the thing that Chuck Johnson says, or the crazier thing A, B, C, D, E, and F, it has to get covered. And it might be because Donald Trump is running for president of the United States. It might be because, to your point, someone who once knew Tucker can't understand it and wants to show what a nut or a loon he's become, or somebody is trying to tag the MAGA/Republican movement with, you know, you open the book with, it was Tuesday when the Nazis showed up, right? Like, but in the process, that is allowing all of that on the right to really dominate the conversation in the country. And it's this mystification that, you know, 8 years, 9 years into the Trumpist era, you know, reporters, people on the left, Democrats, still haven't figured out largely how to decode.
Yeah. It's a weird bubble that I think reporters have built for themselves, unfortunately. And I'm constantly trying to test my own assumptions on the MAGA movement as well, because sometimes they will just veer completely into nowhere. But there just seems to be a general inability to accept that the world could go the way that the world has gone. And once you start realizing the context in which a lot of media people grew up in, they're kind of a self-selecting group who increasingly had to go to certain schools in order to get their foot in the door, and then get into,
right. Like if you didn't go to a Mid-Atlantic/Northeast liberal arts college and then make your way to Northwestern's Medill School, right? Do you even journalism?
Yeah, and at a certain point, even hiring someone as the token conservative doesn't really serve you well in a newsroom, because one, your very existence kind of makes everyone else in the newsroom go are you legitimate or not? And two, whoever is the token conservative also always ends up being constantly questioned by their editors as to whether the thing they're trying to report is right or not, or whether it's just based in a non-reality.
One of your editors was talking about that. I don't remember the exact story, but he was like, that's too fringe. And when I read that, I'm like, I don't know how many years ago it was, Tina, but I'm like, it's not fringe anymore. Look at what we're seeing. Right? Think about this, just to bring it, to a week or so, 10 days ago, right? When you have Aaron Rodgers, an NFL quarterback, going on a very popular ESPN show, not a political show, an ESPN show, spouting talks about pedophiles and Anthony Fauci and everything else, you don't think it's mainstream? It's ESPN frickin' N.
Mm-hmm. There always seems to be questions of there has to be an adult in the room to pull Trump back from doing this, or get everyone to stop doing this, or tell Aaron Rodgers that he can't stop saying it. But the very act of someone in power trying to tell someone not to do something is poison. It is absolutely poison to everyone who is not powerful. And that is once you're in the mainstream media, it's just a constant uphill battle to keep fighting that assumption over and over and over again. The moment I tell someone that something's happening on the right, just anything anodyne, it's they start yelling at me to try to convince me that I'm wrong. And I'm I'm just telling you what they're telling me, guys.
No, and you talked about at Vanity Fair when somebody asked you about, is Trump going to win the nomination? You're like, I think Trump could win the whole election if they moved their desk away from yours, right? Just by being near you, somehow the radiation is emitting, the gamma rays will infect them too,
mm-hmm.
right?
But going back to that point about the media bubbles, here's an interesting thing I've also noticed over time. The reason I got into the right to begin with was through a conservative journalism program, which is a thing that exists. They find promising young journalists who are, in my case, quote unquote, liberty-minded, and throw paid internships at you and make that upon condition of going to a seminar over the summer about journalism in the Free Society.
Right, yeah. Sort of the free vacation for a timeshare pitch kind of ideology.
Mm-hmm. But what if you're saving America doing it?
Right. What if you're saving civilization?
But the moment that you get into right-wing media, your resume is just absolutely sullied at that point. No matter the moment you get into like right-wing anything, your resume is kind of sullied. And so I knew all of these people who ended up going to Fox, to the Washington Examiner, New York Post, any of these places that were like considered right-wing, and they'd be doing amazing journalism there. But at that point, if they tried to get out, people would be like, we're not hiring you. You used to work at Fox. And so at that point, you have a couple of choices, which is like, one, just give in and keep living your life and go down this road. Two, just like quit somehow. Three, go to one of those expensive journalism schools to purge your resume and prove that you're actually a really good journalist. And I had to pay $100,000 to do this. Or in my case, become a grinding content monkey and blog for like 3 years.
But let me ask you this, not to sound too old-fashioned, but don't you think that the trials and tribulations of your own personal time in the desert, which I think anyone who has been in that desert, and we all have our own, and has walked through it and come out the other side and found a metaphorical oasis such as it was, doesn't that in some ways make it all worth it too? Like if it had just been handed to you, if they just came and said, hey, by the way, we're starting this new, you haven't done anything, right? And by the way, now we're starting this thing called Puck and we want you to come. Like, would you be ready for it? Would you be as good for it? Would you be who you are without that? And that's what I see is like, but for all of that friction to get where we are, you wouldn't know enough to appreciate it.
I mean, it's nice that I do, and I'm happy that I do, and I'm happy that someone pays me to tell people about this, and I'm happy that people are listening. If I were not at Puck, I think I would be having a much harder time covering the right the way that I do. The great thing about Puck is that they view the world through that lens of power that I was talking about earlier, but also like who's trying to be in control, who's losing control, and it allows me to treat the right as seriously as I can without like sneering about it or being like, oh, it's never going to happen.
Well, because for me, this particular right-wing movement in this time with Donald Trump as its head, and you could go back 100 years or whenever you to, governance is sort of a chimera. It's a shine they put on things. It's really control, to me anyway. Because if you look at the people like in Congress, right, that are sort of the biggest adherents to this stuff, I'm sure Chip Roy, right, that goon, I'm sure he could cite many of the same conservative philosophers you do. That guy has he has no desire whatsoever to actually be a reasonable person in government. He's just there to do the kinds of things that you were talking about earlier.
I mean, look, that was the entire point of the conservative movement to begin with, right? It was, oh no, Lyndon B. Johnson has started to use the executive branch to enact a great society and do all these things that are moving society a little bit like too forward too quickly. It's also happening in Congress. What if they're communists? Oh no, we need to get control of these institutions over time. It doesn't matter how long it will take. And we're going to devote a lot of resources to thinking about how to do this. Now, the vision that they had for what they wanted society to look like sure didn't look like where Trump and the Tea Party and people before him, what have you, wanted society to, like, that vision does not match what the movement founders' vision was. Let's say Buckley, Goldwater, what have you. But the overall mechanism is still there. And when you have a whole bunch of people who grew up inside this mechanism, learning how to do things one way for the ostensible achievement of a certain vision of conservatism, and then the right in America moves like far elsewhere, what are you going to do? You still want to maintain control. You still want to maintain control. You still want that power. Otherwise, you lose literally everything you've spent your adult life working for.
I mean, I remember being at a dinner in Baltimore a couple of years ago, and I was sitting across the table from a guy, and he was very much in the mold of people you were talking about, right? This was a beautiful club, nice wine, everything else. He's in, of course, a perfect suit and tie. I am, of course, completely underdressed. And he's going through the whole thing. And he said, and of course, there's always the left and the powers of the left. And I said, with all due respect, sir, I have now spent 2+ years with these people. Like, they can't organize a 2-car motorcade without getting in a fight about it. Right? So let me just say that, like, all of the stuff they want to do, one, is fundamentally, especially the most progressive, Tina, is still fundamentally out of step with the vast majority of the country. But also, they're not nice enough to A, each other, or B, other people to ever get it done. And C, they lack the discipline. And I think that's what we've seen. Again, I always say that the movement on the right, as much as I disagree with what it has become, and I do, is well-resourced, well-organized, and relentless.
Right. And the movement on the left just loves shooting their own the moment that they become, pragmatic in some way. Like, look what's happening with John Fetterman. The moment he supports Israel, the entire progressive left turns on him and now calls him the most, evil guy who ever existed. And then they completely forget the part where he's the senator from Pennsylvania, which is purple. Like, so purple. It is not your progressive utopia. There's no way he can take that position, the pro-Gaza position, without alienating, oh gosh, how big of a percentage of Pennsylvania voters?
Right.
And now they're going to turn to
the home of the Tree of Life Synagogue.
Yes, exactly. Like, it's so short-sighted. And
but both, this is what happens. I think the right-wing movement is bigger, right, and better funded and on the move, and the left wing is smaller, more crystallized, but neither one of them operate in a reality of how actual human beings live. And I think this is, to me, the biggest part is, like, democracy, demos, is about the people. And both of you are all talking about how you want to tell other people how to live their lives. And Americans, as you know, are fickle and allergic to that kind of stuff. Just by our Constitution, small c Constitution, not even big C Constitution. Like, Americans of all colors, creeds, religions, regions, whatever, for the most part, first and foremost, want to be left alone.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
That was, okay, no, when people ask me, oh my God, Tina, were you like a Nazi or something? I'm like, no, what I really wanted was that libertarian moment called everyone leave us alone, and the free markets were cool, and everyone would be okay with what you thought, and rational self-interest ruled the day. Whenever people ask me exactly what I believe politically, I just sort of go, that's what I'd like.